morning, dear people of the internet, and welcome to the past, the present, and the future. Because today we need a little bit of a history lesson, I think. Because last week, or a few weeks ago, I got a comment that said that art is not political, and another comment saying that knitting and crochet are just crafts and nothing more than that. And while I believe that these comments were made in good faith, I don't agree, and we need to talk about this because I've seen a lot of this sentiment on the internet as of late, and it's important. Before we get into that, I have this delusional plan of this channel supporting me through college and beyond, and you can help me with that massively by subscribing and watching my videos if you like them. Recently we got to 1,000 subscribers, and because of that I'm doing a giveaway, which is explained in my previous video, but we're not there yet, and I would love if you would join my channel, so thank you for that. Now let's get started. Over the past few days I keep seeing people knitting and crocheting these red hats that are called melt the ice hats. They're made to show that you're opposed to the ice. You know what I mean. They're derived from a Norwegian protest in which people also knitted red hats to show that they were opposed to people in power at the time. I saw a short by these people here explaining what the history behind these red hats are, and I thought that I wanted to learn more about that, so I did, and now I'm going to tell you. In Norway, and honestly everywhere else, but this is part of Norwegian culture, Santa wears a red hat. Or their Santa equivalent, which is called a nisse. Nisse are these creatures that live in their house and do chores, and every Yule or Christmas they expect porridge as a gift, which is really important to them, and so nisse are related to Christmas. In the 19th century, Santa became a thing, and Santa wore a red hat, so nisse have been depicted more and more wearing red hats, especially around Christmas or Yule. During the first few years of the Second World War, people were sending each other Christmas cards with nisse on them, with the text God Norsk Jul, which loosely translates to Merry Norwegian Christmas. During this time, people also started wearing and knitting red hats to express their resistance, because the nisse and the red hat and the Christmas cards were all connected to Norwegian culture, and also red is a color in the Norwegian flag also. Showing any affiliation with Norwegian culture at the time was forbidden, so people had to resort to doing things like this. In 1942, this also became forbidden, the red hats were not allowed anymore, and these Christmas cards were confiscated. The red hats became a way to protest against fascism, which is why people in the USA are knitting and crocheting them now too. I've seen some people online calling this performative activism, and they say that instead of knitting or crocheting these red hats, you should actually go to protest and call your representatives. But I don't entirely agree with that sentiment. First of all, you can do both, why not? And taking part in activism like this is also just not useless, as it sounds, maybe. It might be a little bit performative, but it's still a form of activism, and honestly, what activism is not performative? The fact that these red hats were forbidden by the Germans in 1942 shows that they saw it as a threat, which is incredibly powerful. Wearing and making these red hats shows that you don't agree with the things going on right now, and it also shows solidarity with other people who feel like you, and other people who have been through terrible things because of what is going on. There's also a concrete positive effect of these red hats. The pattern online is sold for $5, I believe, and all the proceeds, so 100% of the sales, are donated to the people who are affected by things happening in Minnesota right now. They've already raised over $250,000 doing this, which is so much. It also shows that the pattern has been sold over 5,000 times, which is a lot for a knitting pattern. And that doesn't go unnoticed. Like, I live on the other side of the world, and I've been seeing this. I have the feeling that I want to make this hat and support people with this kind of action. So it's great because, again, solidarity, and also the money raised for the people that really need it right now is also incredibly great. And that shows that this action has an effect one way or another, in multiple ways actually. I just don't hope it's the exact same effect that it had in Norway in the 1940s, that it becomes forbidden. That would be terrible, because also a piece of clothing not allowing a red head, which is a very basic piece of clothing, that's weird. But I don't hope that will happen. In the age of social media, knitting and crochet is also often used as a form of activism. Now, this is arguably not always political, but I thought it would be important to share this with you in the context of this video, because I'm also trying to show you that knitting and crochet are not just crafts. This person makes garments with text related to activism, for example. This top says, "It's just a craft until man says it's art," which relates to the sentiment that men decide what is art and that women are inherently more related to crafts and only allowed to do crafts. This sentiment is still very much alive in the art world, and there are more and more spaces for women also in the art world, but this change is very slow and honestly can be faster. These pens from the same artist have the text "but who gave you permission," which relates to the need for consent in intimate situations, which is a thing that still needs attention. Now, will this change the world? Probably not, but it also doesn't have to. Asking for attention for topics like these make people think, and it also opens up the conversation a little bit more about consent, for example, which is very important. Another thing that pops up on my social media feed every now and then is this performance art piece. In 2014, artist Bia Camacho spent 11 hours crocheting herself into this red cocoon. On this Reddit post that I found this right now is the comment from the following person that explains this performance. The piece is largely up to interpretation, but it's also mainly about isolation, the place of women in spaces like museums, and the comfort and simultaneous isolation found in things like crochet. I love it so much because it's about safety, but also about how the reception of the safety, the devotion of oneself to safety, can cause isolation. I don't really know how this has affected people and what people thought about this, but at least people are still talking about this, and it has been 12 years. So you can definitely say that this piece is a conversation starter, and these topics are still very relevant to this day, if not even more relevant today than it was in 2014. Another crochet artist who crochets conversation starters is Alexandria Maas. She is currently crocheting the information sheet of her birth control every month when she is on her period. And this opens up the conversation about women's reproductive health and people with uteruses in general, but it's important because research has focused in the past on men's bodies' health. Like, medical research on women's bodies is a very, very recent thing in general, so there has not been a lot of attention, if any at all, for this topic in the medical research field in general. And this artist is posting videos about this every month, like these.
I'm crocheting my birth control information sheet word for word, and this is the part 13 update. This will be the last update of the year. In January 2025, I started this daunting project. During my period week, I work on this tapestry and post an update. I want to reflect on how much I've done this year, but first, housekeeping. I decided to put some cedar pouches in the bin where I store the tapestry, just in case. I finished up the 4th panel this week, which was nice. There was a lot of medical words that I don't know how to spell, so that's always harder. I crossed off what I finished this year in pink. As you can see, it's a decent chunk done. I still have a few years left of this project, but I'm proud of my progress. I write everything down in my notebook and cross it off as I go. I'm not tired of working on this yet, and having words change every 6 rows is engaging enough for me to want to work on it. Big thank you to the Knit Picks team who have graciously been gifting me all of the yarn for this project. This project wouldn't be possible without all of their generosity. As you know, nice wool yarn is expensive, and I'm so grateful for their support. As for the yarn count, I have used 55 balls of white and 22 balls of red, and if my math is correct, the tapestry is already 17 pounds. Wow. Thank you so much to everyone who has tuned into this project this year and for sharing your love and support. Starting a positive conversation about reproductive rights is difficult right now, so I just wanted to say thank you for being the change that you want to see.
A lot of people watch these videos, and the comments are full of people saying that they want to see this piece in museums. I even found a comment of a curator from a museum in the UK who has expressed the need to exhibit this piece in the museum they work at. That at least shows that people are interested in this and that it's getting the attention that it deserves. So crochet and knitting, often combined with social media, has the power of getting people's attention. People don't see these crafts or arts actually used in these contexts a lot, so people get curious when they see stuff like this, which is actually really powerful. Crochet and knitting itself can also be a tool for people to help people. These art forms have the image of just being a craft for women, and women has the image of just being innocent bystanders, which is absolutely infuriating and not how the world works at all, and has not worked for literally the beginning of time. But these stereotypes exist, and we cannot deny them, which was useful during both World War I and World War II. During those time, people, well, women, hid secret messages in their knit garments. Knitting women and clothes in general were seen as pretty harmless, except for the red hat, but you know, so they could do this right under the enemy's nose. In the very basics, knitting uses 2 stitches, a knit stitch and a purl stitch, which looks different because one looks like a knit stitch on the front and one looks like a knit stitch on the back. So you can use knit stitches and purl stitches for making words in Morse code, which is what people did at the time. There's also other ways that people used to put coded messages in their knit garments at the time, for example by counting trains and dropping a stitch whenever a train went by, so it would just look like an accident, for example. But the knit and purl stitches Morse code thing is for like actual words communication very useful. They ask women to apply to espionage missions like these with posters. such as this one. And with these feathers, you would only really know what you're looking at if you were looking for it, if you know what was in them. Otherwise, it would just look like a normal garment, maybe with a few mistakes, but that happens a lot with hand knitting. Who doesn't make mistakes? That's totally fine. So it would just look like a normal hand knit sweater. So that's incredible. It's also still kind of sad because it shows that crafting women are highly underestimated. We've already seen that crochet and knitting can be used to ask attention for certain political and activist topics. And in 2003, artist Betsy Greer coined the term craftivism for this. Greer was intrigued by quiet activism. So craftivism is mostly making people think about something rather than telling people what to think about something. The connection between woman, crafting and quiet is still alive to this day, and these connections are more and more used to protest for feminist causes. I think it's really poetic to use a somewhat offensive stereotype and turn it into something powerful that you can use to protest this stereotype with and still use the thing. That can be a simple, well, not simple, but I mean in terms of amount of organization, amount of people you need, because you can do this on your own. That can be as simple as yarn bombing trees or street lamps. That can look like this, and it's used to protest the grey cities and capitalist efficient-paced society that we have nowadays by just putting some color everywhere and making people think about this, because it kind of looks weird in the context of the city. It also looks like the Pussy Hat protest in 2017. At this protest, organizers had the goal of making 1 million people wear these pink hats that they made, and they did it at the Women's March in Washington to protest the inauguration of the big orange clown who had some very annoying or weird or not great ideas about women's rights. The Pussy Hat project still exists, and they now do a project in which they make handmade blankets and they give them to immigrants as welcome presents, which is great and amazing, I think. That also shows that protest and activism like this doesn't just stop at one topic and is highly intersectional. The last example I want to tell you about is the Dutch feminist action group Dolomina. In the 70s, they protested a lot for equal rights between women and men. Recently, the Dolomina group has kind of been reinstated because of raising gender-based violence in the Netherlands. On the 28th of January of this year, so just a few days ago, they organized a protest called Stitches Against Violence. In this protest, they asked people to go to train stations and knit or crochet or weave even. There were people weaving or do needle points in public transit or at train stations, so people could see that a lot of people were doing this to basically ask attention for increased violence in every part of the world. This specific protest was not only for women, but for like every violence in the world, because we have seen an increase in violence over the last literal year and also before that, and it's terrible. So there's also protests to ask attention for that, and get attention they did because they ended up in Dutch media and newspapers. Now, you might just be sitting on your couch looking at your craft and thinking, why does everything need to be political or activism? I just want to sit here and crochet or knit or whatever. And I get that, and the good news is that you don't have to use your craft to say anything and you can still make whatever you want. However, I do think that it is still good to be aware of this history and aware of the power that crochet and knitting can have in this context. And I also think that it's really important to know that knitting and crochet are some things that inherently go against the status quo of capitalism, because it's a slow craft. A lot of people make clothes or plushies and it goes a lot slower than it's often made in the fast fashion industry, and fast fashion is really hard to avoid nowadays, especially if you're not rich. That doesn't mean that overconsumption and capitalism doesn't exist in these communities. It certainly does, but the fact still is that it's a lot slower than fast fashion and you're still using something and therefore consuming less fast fashion, I would assume. I think that's the case for most crocheters and knitters in general. So slow fashion is an inherent part of crochet or knitting, whether you like it or not. I also keep seeing these kinds of videos.
White blank page and a swelling red.
And while I appreciate the sentiment, I kind of don't follow the logic here, because this would be true for going to the toilet or petting your cat or literally everything that you do in your daily life. In the end, I don't think it's important to say whether something is political or not political. I think it's more important to ask yourself which skills you have and how you can use them to fight for something that you want to see change in the world or to help other people. And it's also important to ask yourself how you can do that in a way that doesn't drain your energy faster than playing a mobile game on your phone does. Which is a privilege, but it's less delusional than saying that art is not political. Because whatever you do, the history of you doing that thing is a part of that. I learned a lot from writing this video, and I think I might make some themed socks soon with these kinds of themes. If you know about more initiatives that fit this context, please let me know, because I would love to read and hear about them. Thank you for watching. If you like my little video, please press the wonderful shiny like and subscribe buttons, and then I will see you next time. Ciao!